So let's dig into our next session. Aggie Square is where university, industry, and community come together to create opportunities for everyone. This planned innovation hub on UC Davis's Sacramento campus will be home to research programs, private industry partners, classrooms, student housing, and public-facing programs that engage local communities and entrepreneurs. Aggie Square will create a unique live, learn, work, play environment to foster collaboration and creativity. Entrepreneurs, companies, and workers can thrive in this technology campus that values inclusion and creates chance encounters among creative people. So here to tell you more about this collaborative technology and innovation campus are Bob Segar, Associate Vice Chancellor for Campus Planning and Environmental Stewardship at UC Davis, and Mark Romney, Chief Industry Alliance Officer at UC Davis. So Bob and Mark, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to invite everyone to welcome Mark and Bob to the Zoom stage. So go ahead. Yeah, there you go. So it's all yours.
Fantastic. Can you see that, Laura?
Yes, I can. It looks great.
Fantastic. Well, welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Mark Romney. I'm the Chief Industry Alliance Officer at UC Davis. I also serve as the Director of Research Development and Industry Alliances for the School of Medicine. Bob, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Laura. Name's Bob Segar, and as Laura said, I direct campus planning at UC Davis, and I'm acting as Chancellor May's Planning Director to launch the Aggie Square project. Thanks for having us today.
So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into a little bit of the overview. So over my 30 years working at UC Davis School of Medicine, I've watched the research grant portfolio grow from roughly $65 million when I started back in the early 90s to currently about $300 million a year. And on a national level, the ranking of the School of Medicine of the roughly 130 medical schools went from 62nd all the way up to 26th in a really short 10-year period. Notably acknowledged as one of the fastest growing medical schools in the United States. An amazing accomplished, but with that tremendous growth comes challenges. So in keeping with the need to provide additional research space for our faculty, I knew I had to pull together and come up with a longer term strategic plan for additional research space. You know, we call it developing new pathways, but it really means space. So concurrently, I was also being responsible for the industry partnerships within the School of Medicine. It's, you know, facilitating these co-location opportunities with industry that wanted to go beyond just sponsoring research. They want to work, you know, side by side with our faculty in the labs and either license our technology or co-develop new technology. And I knew that I just couldn't build just another research building to satisfy the need. I really need to create what I call like an innovation ecosystem to support it. So one of the first things I did was join the Association of University Research Parks, which is a national association or international of all the top research parks in the United States and then in Canada and elsewhere. And through them, I really understood what was needed to create this innovation ecosystem. So we started strictly on a School of Medicine focused, yet very intentional and aligned, but it's a very narrow focused initiative. But as you know, in 2017, a lot of things changed. One of those big things was that a newly elected mayor, Darrell Steinberg, we shared this idea of Aggie Square, or what became Aggie Square, as a new sort of concept. And I didn't know how well it resonated with him. At the same time, UC Office of the President was recruiting a new chancellor at UC Davis. And they had selected Gary May, who was the Dean of Engineering at Georgia Tech. Dr. May was very involved in the development of this technology square, which is one of the top innovation districts or research parks, basically, in the United States. So what was surprising is that the mayor and a group of people went out and visited the incoming Chancellor May, and they struck a very close relationship and really aspired to see how they could replicate the Tech Square concept in Sacramento. what was great is that both of them became champions and bonded very closely. And so we had been working on this small little pilot, what we call an innovation district at that time. So when Chancellor May arrived in the summer of 2017, and one of the first meetings we had with him, I was giving a presentation of the School of Medicine Innovation Park that we were planning, and he raised his hand halfway through the meeting, and I remember thinking, okay, there's one person that doesn't need to raise their hand in a meeting. But he said, I have two questions. One, can we change the name to Aggie Square? And I wasn't sure then, but it's stuck now. And I thought, okay, I'll change it. That's great. He said, can you open it to the rest of the UC Davis campus, all the other schools and colleges? Which is something we had connections with the other colleges that we have relationships with. But he said, I want to make it open to everybody. And then I really want to see you bring undergraduates to the Sacramento campus for that experiential and opportunity to be around the clinical sciences and other life science activities are going on there. From that point, then Mayor Steinberg and Chancellor May formed a task force to sort of look at opportunities in Sacramento as to where what eventually became Aggie Square could evolve and grow. And unfortunately for us, they selected the Sacramento campus. They worked so closely that over those last fall, they received a national award for the Leadership Award from AURP at the International Conference, which recognizes those governmental or high-level leaders, typically a governor or congressperson or U.S. senator, who's been very influential in the development of innovation districts. But they both, as first time it's ever been given out as a joint award, so Mayor Steinberg and Chancellor May at that time really demonstrated nationally the value and need for the city governments and institutions to partner together to create these innovation districts. So one of the things we knew about UC Davis is we've got to build on our entrepreneurial culture. Currently we have about 900 active patents. Last year alone, UC Davis launched 16 startups, made 107 invention disclosures, and completed 85 licensing agreements. But we needed that sandbox to really amplify that work. So in the beginning, we started to map out our vision for this innovation district, and we knew that we could not merely copy the blueprints of Stanford Research Park or Research Triangle in North Carolina. We need to evaluate all the programs at UC Davis and in the region that we're good at and with strong programs and ones that are attractive to industry. What initiatives do we have in the strength to differentiate us from Stanford and others? So it's not a competition. So once we identified what we did well and what programs are at a stage where collaboration with industry could advance commercialization or leading to new therapies or new technologies. So this is what we call sort of low-hanging fruit. So we started with looking, and for the case of this session, I'm focusing on life sciences, even though there's a broader thematic focus at Aggie Square, but for the sake of this discussion, it's on life sciences. So I've listed here many of what I call the evolving anchor themes or larger themes that are evolving initially at Aggie Square. If it's food as medicine, looking at prescribing food in addition to the small molecule drug for patients like cardiac rehab patients, making sure that people are following the nutritional side of that. Obviously cancer, we've got one of the largest Northern California or the National Cancer Institute's designated cancer center, which is part of the UC Health. All 5 UC hospitals have a cancer center, NCI designated, and they represent the largest cancer consortium in the world. So we have 13 million patients within their system. Data science, AI, ML, digital health are big, strong areas, and they're really, embedding themselves and applying to both clinical care and basic science. We have very strong translational neuroscience programs, which really looks at, neurology, neurosurgery, multiple departments, physical medicine, rehabilitation, and others that really come together and really address the neurological disorders from either therapy-based, stem cell-based, or exoskeleton technology, and really how to address these terrible diseases and disorders. Diagnostic innovation, our pathology department stepped up during this whole COVID period and helped develop new testing modalities for COVID, partnering with industry. Medical device development, of course, both industry and the university and entrepreneurs in the community are developing medical devices and need that test bed or testing environment to validate and to amplify or commercialize some of that technology. Life science training is teaching the surgeons of tomorrow on new technology in surgical skills. And then regenerative medicine, which is another big area, is really creating that cell and gene therapy hub on the West Coast to really look at developing cures instead of treatments for many of these things. And so we've been successful having 50,000 square feet that we had already in Sacramento. And by 2017-18, that space was all full with industry, a mix of larger, Fortune 100 companies as well as university and regional startup companies. But knowing what do we need to attract additional industry, we know that they're really interested in our technology or our IP that we've developed and what's available in the region. Our graduates, pretty unique graduate programs across UC Davis and diversity of biology and life science related careers. The other big area is workforce. And as I look at the innovation districts, typically it's about 40% of the workforce in these innovation districts, and life science especially, does not require a four-year degree. So a lot of times it's a one-year certificate program. And if it's cell and gene therapy, for example, where it's transitioning more to closed automated systems, you need that technician that could run the automated systems. It doesn't require the bachelor's or the PhD. So creating that workforce resources within the region that attracts industry. Because the cost of living is less and the real estate's less in Sacramento than, say, San Francisco. But if you don't have the labor force and that broad workforce from the certificate-based training to the PhD, the attraction or the opportunity doesn't pencil. Workforce training is critical, and it's looking at all the surrounding neighborhoods and communities in Sacramento, and it's at entry level, provide the pathway. And so we're working not only UC Davis, but with Los Rios Community College District, with Sacramento State, with Solano Community College. In the case, one example is biomedical or biomanufacturing, is really creating the workforce for the cell and gene therapy hub. It's really impactful when we can have that workforce training and diverse training on the Sacramento campus, and Aggie Square becomes a venue for all the universities and colleges and industry to partner and creating this workforce training structure. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Bob Segar to talk about the evolution of where really Aggie Square is and what it is.
Great. Thank you, Mark. All right. So if you can move us forward, I get the fun job of sharing with you guys how Aggie Square is taking shape so that the themes and the areas of investment that Mark was just outlining can take shape, and you can see how this new 1 million square foot innovation district is evolving. And we're reaching some really key milestones that have us very optimistic about the next steps. So Mark, let's jump right in. So of course, you all know where the UC Davis Sacramento campus is on Stockton Boulevard, just southeast of downtown Sacramento in the state capitol, about a 20-minute drive from the College Town campus in Davis. On a good day, can be longer on a bad traffic day. In fact, one of the early accomplishments of the Mayor Chancellor partnership that Mark referenced in the beginning of his talk was you may have seen him on the road between Davis and Sacramento, but there are these all electric buses called the Causeway Connection, and they came through a $12 million grant from the Electrify America program, where the mayor and SACOG and City of Sacramento actually used some of the capacity that they had within this Electrify America program. And the source of that was the payout that Volkswagen had to do a few years back for their emissions troubles that they had. And so the city and SACOG invested in this Causeway all-electric connection between the Sacramento campus, downtown Sacramento, and the Davis campus. So already, just when Aggie Square was just beginning to emerge as an idea, Mayor and Chancellor were already, and regional entities were already working on how to better connect the heart of Sacramento with our two UC Davis campuses, knowing that linkage between the two campuses was critical to the success of the Aggie Square endeavor. So now we're going to move to the Sacramento campus itself and show you where it sits. So there you have it. Okay, so Stockton Boulevard, the colored zones here make up the UC Davis Sacramento campus, home of the medical center and the School of Medicine, School of Nursing. It's about 150 acres. At the north end, so Stockton Boulevard runs on the left side, the west side of the Sacramento campus. At the north end is the hospital, UC Davis Hospital, and then you come around the kind of east side or the right-hand side where it says patient care. That's where there are ambulatory clinics, also patient care areas. In the middle where it says education core in the pink zone, that's where the School of Medicine, the Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing, which by the way, started up a few years ago with a $100 million grant from the Gordon and Betty Irene Moore Foundation. That's why the School of Nursing is named as such. And then 3 small research buildings that make up the education core. And there you can see Aggie Square. It's within a 25-acre collaboration and research zone that we've identified on the campus. The first phase of Aggie Square is about 8 acres, and it's about 1 million square feet, and represents about $1.1 billion worth of overall capital investment. And in many ways, it's building out the education core of the campus, but in a very, very different way than we've done before. And I'll show you what we mean by that in the next slide. So this is the footprint of that 8 acres in the phase 1 of Aggie Square. From left to right, along Stockton Boulevard, you see what it says, a mixed-use housing building. I'll say more about that in a minute. Then up top, you see 2 science and technology buildings, west and east. Those buildings, we've got some massing diagrams to show you, make up about 600,000 square feet of lab space. The Lifelong Learning Building is a co-working, classroom, teaching building with offices and public-facing programs for UC Davis, and a parking garage to support it all. The difference is, in the past, if UC Davis was building a research building, we would have tried to get state funding, and we would have built a research. In fact, just north of this footprint, there are 3 research buildings where we sought state funding and built our own research buildings. And you wouldn't have been reading much about that in the paper. The thing that's different about Aggie Square is that this whole thing is built on a premise of co-location and hosting not only our own activity, but the industries that Mark was referencing, the educational partners, the community-based organizations for training, so that it's a whole ecosystem, not just us. In fact, our projection is that of the 1 million square feet in this initial phase, UC Davis will be occupying about half for our own research and public-facing work, and the other half would be for the industry partners and educational and community-based partners. So a very different notion of how to create an innovation ecosystem and propel it forward. Now I think we've got a 3-dimensional view of this. There you go. Okay, so let me get you oriented. At the upper left-hand part of this slide, the tallest building that you see, that's the hospital. That's UC Davis Hospital. Just below that is the Shriners Hospital coming down along Stockton Boulevard. So there are the 4 Aggie Square buildings. The residential building is the leftmost one, then the 2 lab buildings, Life Science, Technology, Engineering, and then the Lifelong Learning Building. We've got some great public spaces designed. You see the Aggie Square space in the middle. As a campus planner and urban designer, the thing that makes a great public space is what happens on its edges. So all 4 of those new buildings will have entries that pour people out into that Aggie Square space, and that'll be the main innovation space, the mixing space, the event space, where people meet people they wouldn't have met otherwise, in addition to the public and shared spaces we have inside the buildings. There's another public space right along Stockton Boulevard where you see those yellow trees. We're calling it the Market Plaza, and it's where we're going to have a farmer's market pavilion. And the first floor of that residential building, when we say mixed use, you tend to think residential above, commercial down below. But down below for us is not so much commercial as it is community serving uses. You may have read about the Alice Waters Institute for Edible Education. That is a program we have attracted from Alice Waters, the famous chef from Berkeley. But 25 years ago, she founded the Edible Schoolyard Foundation, dedicated to healthy food for school kids of all ages. This institute that's now going to be affiliated with UC Davis is dedicated to free sustainable school lunch for every school child in California. And that means backing up the research and the policy and the operational work all the way back up to the health of soil in local sustainable farms and how that food gets to a child's plate in all of our schools. Very exciting, but it's an example of the kind of partnerships. It's already attracted 5 different schools and colleges across UC Davis to be partners. Lots more we can say about this, but let's keep going so you get a sense of everything that's there. This is an image of the Lifelong Learning Building as it will be viewed from Stockton Boulevard. So you can see we're opening up the campus. When you drive down Stockton Boulevard, we don't want it to be a barrier of buildings. We want great public spaces full of people. So this is what you'll see. One more note about the Lifelong Learning Building. Mark mentioned all the kind of how important workforce development and training is, in particular for those entry and middle skills jobs, tech jobs that it takes to support the research and the industry that's going to be there. One of the anchor programs in our Lifelong Learning Building will be our own continuing and professional education group, which used to be known as UC Davis Extension. They're partnering with the community colleges, with industry, to create a new life sciences training consortium that will start with biomanufacturing that Mark mentioned and then expand out from there, so that these new industries evolve and take hold in Sacramento, that will be feeding training from all ends of the workforce. There's another view. Now you're standing in Aggie Square. We took a few trees out so you could see better. Lifelong Learning is on your right. The 2 lab buildings, again, about 600,000 square feet straight ahead. And then the Food and Health Initiative on the building to your left with the residences up above. Just to show you how Aggie Square is taking hold, that residential building is geared primarily at students, but we're undertaking a study right now with our Graduate School of Management to see what would happen if we created a living learning environment for students that was focused on innovation and entrepreneurship. We don't have anything like that on the campus right now. And it's just a way that the innovation and entrepreneurship lens is really permeating all the thinking about Aggie Square. And that's what's so exciting about it. Here's another view from the north. So if you were coming down from the hospital with the Life Sciences Technology Engineering East building on your left and the West building on your right, and if you kept going, you'd arrive back at that Aggie Square public space that I talked about earlier. So this is an image. Mark may want to make a comment on this about just how flexible these labs are going to be in the model that we're putting forward at Aggie Square.
Yeah, Bob, thank you. In 30 years of lab planning, I found out that if you custom design a lab for a researcher or recruit, it's only as good as long as they're here. So we transitioned to a trend of having flexible labs that are sort of generic enough to allow support a variety of types of research, of open lab and lab support, and their specialty rooms. You'll see in here like the quick disconnects in the ceilings. So majority of the spaces in Aggie Square were built this way to allow programs or companies to come in and actually self-connect to all the utilities in the ceiling without having a contractor come in and provide that for them. And the flexibility to expand and contract programs or thematic programs as time goes on. And also the natural light aspect is critical to us. So having transparency, not only between from the office side into the lab, but also the daylight bringing it in. So.
Great. Okay, so just a word here, and then we'll finish up and have time for conversation. This project, the other thing that's different about it for UC Davis is it's on university land, but the buildings will be built by a private developer, and then the university is going to lease space back. So that 50% of space that we'll occupy will be a major tenant, and then the rest of the spaces will be available for industry and other partners to lease. And that's what enables us to do this co-hosting environment. The fact that these will be privately owned buildings, not funded in a way by the university that would restrict the hosting of private industry and others. So it makes it a much more innovative and wide open opportunity. We chose a firm after a very intentional and deliberative process called Wexford Science and Technology. We're going to tell you a little bit about them and why we chose them. So Wexford, if you look them up, they have one business line and they operate in 15 major urban areas across the United States. Their one business line is partnering with major research universities and academic medical centers to create innovation districts. They call them knowledge communities. Wexford has a fascinating model where their whole secret to success is picking the right university in the right city. And they tend to pick, like, they don't focus on the big obvious life sciences markets of Boston, San Francisco, San Diego. They're looking for exactly the kind of situation that we have with UC Davis in Sacramento. They're looking for robust and vibrant cities, really with an under-leveraged university, so that Wexford can come in and help the university take its next step and then leverage that university work to attract industry to their own projects. So they're very pioneering. They're super successful. I think our next slide shows you some of the communities that they've worked in. Well, yeah, look at the universities across the bottom. They're building a project at Arizona State in Phoenix right now. They're with Brown University in Providence. Interesting kind of parallels to Sacramento. It's about an hour from Boston. It's a capital city, much smallest state in the union, of course, not the biggest, but the same kind of positioning of the university and the city. They're with Penn and Drexel University in Philadelphia, University of Maryland. One of their most successful ones with Washington University in St. Louis. If you aren't familiar with Washington University, it's one of the most robust academic medical centers in the country. So really fascinating portfolio. We're thrilled to get them. And I think we're going to go on and tell you, beyond bringing the capital to build the project, Wexford also brings what they call innovation infrastructure. And it really involves three things, and they're in that blue box. It involves flexible facilities. So Wexford is going to bring partnerships initially with this group called the Cambridge Innovation Center that will be co-working wet lab facilities in addition to tech facilities, so that if you just need a few linear feet of benchtop, you can lease that on a month-to-month basis to get your startup going in the life sciences area or in the tech area and grow from there, and either stay in that Cambridge Innovation Center for as long as you need to, or grow out into Aggie Square or out into the larger Sacramento market. You may have read some, yeah, there's a diagram. So there are three components to their innovation infrastructure. The for-profit Cambridge Innovation Center, again, that shared co-working lab, benchtop, and tech. Then they bring a group called the Venture Cafe, which actually they've done this enough to know that you need a nonprofit to do all the public programming. So they hold really dynamic, at least once a week programs with hundreds of people attracted from across the community to propel conversation in the innovation district. So this isn't about building the buildings and just trying to recruit tenants and walk away. There's constant public programming that Wexford brings with their Venture Cafe partner, as well as public meeting space and convening space, free, that they then discount to public groups and the community to go with the rest of the elements of the infrastructure. And this is just an example. This is talking about the flexible office piece of it and the amount of VC raised, the value of VC raised space that they have in the Cambridge Innovation Center client companies. It's the other advantage is that Wexford's national network and then CIC has an international network, so that when you join that organization and do your work there at no matter what scale, you get access to their national and international network of innovation districts. And I think lastly, on the flexible labs, I mentioned that just a little bit ago, but Wexford's in 15 communities, but only a handful of them actually have the flexible wet lab space. And Aggie Square will have that in Sacramento, and it'll really distinguish us in Northern California and provide a huge attraction for companies that want to co-locate with us and have a cost-effective way to start. So there we have it. That's a pretty quick overview, but I really appreciate, I know Mark does too, the opportunity to share where we are and our progress. We are moving forward to our Board of Regents in about 3 weeks, hoping for full approval of all dimensions of the project, including the business terms with Wexford Science and Technology, after which Wexford will be free to break ground, hopefully in the second quarter of 2021. So coming soon to a neighborhood near you.
A couple of questions that came up in the chat that perhaps you could answer. I think you partially answered this one in the last part, but Jim wants to know if what initiatives are in place to foster entrepreneurs and startups not associated with UC Davis? So it looks like they could rent bench space. Is that right? Are there other?
Yeah, Mark, you want to say more about your visit to Cambridge Innovation Center, what you saw there?
Sure, and a couple things. What's interesting about the Cambridge Innovation Center, it's not an incubator or accelerator in the sense that they don't take any equity in companies at all. They're agnostic. So incubator and accelerator programs can utilize this sandbox of the Cambridge Innovation Center, the co-lab and the co-office sort of areas. It's open to obviously any startup. And what was interesting when I visited in Philadelphia and Cambridge, Massachusetts, is how many of the larger companies are there as well. So you go into this area with all these startups, but you have Microsoft and you have IBM and others that have a couple hundred square feet because they want to be around these startups, one, to support them, but also to monitor technology and opportunities to acquire. You have groups that are in there doing sort of the mentoring, the entrepreneur mentoring and things like that. So university will have their programs or innovation access and venture catalyst groups, and Jim Kovac, who runs sort of the School of Medicine, Entrepreneurship, Innovation side, will all be in that ecosystem in Aggie Square and around, but it's open for other companies or support groups to help those innovation. And the Thursday, the Venture Cafe events, typically it's like every Thursday night, and they've been averaging 500 to 600 people attending these events. Even when it's been virtual, and even the Tokyo and Sydney groups will get up in the middle of the night to join the East Coast sessions. It's a great opportunity for the startups and students and industry all to sort of network. And it's every Thursday night, same place, and they're very successful. So, we encourage anybody in the community that wants to be able to support or interact with these startups. There's a venue and an opportunity for that as well.
Yeah, Mark, you just reminded me on the Venture Cafe, one of the examples I remember is to propel this kind of mixing of folks who wouldn't normally meet each other, which is where innovation happens. The example I remember is they pick a topic on just one Thursday night, and they do it every Thursday night of like a topic like resilience. And they invite somebody from the financial markets, somebody with an environmental background, and somebody with a health background. And they all talk about resilience from their point of view, and they attract audiences from all those different disciplines. And they've got like 10 sessions related where people can break out and talk. And that happens every single week with really intentional dynamic programming for all of Sacramento.
So would Aggie Square be planning to organize events like that, or are they looking for a partner to come in and do work like that?
So
that's what the Venture Cafe does.
And that's what they do as a nonprofit. But there's other groups that can come in. I mean, the university will, create programming for events and encourage the community to develop programs or events. So it's really a great sandbox that allows any of the institutions or agencies or groups to come in and have events there as a venue.
Okay, and I think that we've kind of answered Sandeep's question, but I'll throw it out there anyway in case you want to add more. But he says it's great that you're constructing an impressive physical infrastructure for Aggie Square. Are there any initiatives to develop virtual communities focused around the Aggie Square focus area so people can continue to collaborate in situations like we are right now? So I think you answered that, but is there anything you want to add?
Well, I'll tell you, and the pandemic sort of brought it to reality for all of us is really having, one, the network infrastructure, but that communication for the virtual, it's beyond the Zoom, is that we've got to be able to continue. And it's the community education in diseases. It's the food as medicine is teaching people about, how to prepare the meals, and it's the healthy meals. And if people aren't cooking at home, getting away from the fast food, but there's such an experiential opportunity for the community, both the community in Aggie Square and the community around Aggie Square.
Yeah, Laura, the other thought I have is one of the things that's really impressed on us as we've all kind of coped and learned to do as much as we can do in formats like this is that I think, work patterns, obviously, we all know will be different in the future, but the reason people are still going to get together, and it's what Aggie Square is built for, is for collaboration and for creating in person with people across other disciplines in ways that you can't otherwise create. We can keep one another informed, we can keep communicating, we can stay up to date, but actually creating really takes being in person. So I think that's the model for the whole place. And I think it's only amplified how important it's going to be in Sacramento.
Well, I'm really excited about Aggie Square coming to life. I got my start working in the startup community with MedTech ventures, tech startups. And one of the things that's missing and still missing is wet lab space for them to, kind of use like co-working space almost. So that would be really exciting to have that be part of Aggie Square. And maybe we can keep some of these startups here in Sacramento instead of moving to the Bay Area.
Definitely.